I know here the pressure is so high that the kids end school at 2 p.m., 3 p.m., and then they go off to after school tutoring for 3-4 hours. Then they do their homework that was assigned. And some of these kids are 10, 11 years old, and it's 10 p.m. and they're working on homework till 11. So I think, we've got to take a serious look at what are we taking off the plates of our educators? What are we taking off the plates of our students?
Welcome to SELINTalks, where today we're diving into the transformative world of education with none other than Kyle Wagner, a visionary in redefining learning through innovation and collaboration. Kyle, an educational consultant and the founder of Transform Educational Consulting, has made waves across the continents, championing project-based learning and empowering educators and students alike to think beyond the traditional classroom boundaries. His passion for shaping global citizens and fostering empathy, design thinking has not only reshaped curriculums, but has also inspired a new generation of learners. Get ready to be inspired as we explore the future of education with Kyle Wagner. Welcome to today's episode where we're thrilled to have Kyle Wagner, a pioneer in transforming education through learner-centered environments and global collaboration. Diving right in, actually, you've got a very rich background in education consulting. But before we get into that, we're curious about the person behind this professional achievements. What are the fun or unexpected hobby you have that might surprise our audience or our listeners?
Music, singing at all hours of the day, anytime. Yeah, I basically have played music since I was saying my first notes. Actually, before I actually was able to talk, I was probably singing. My parents are both musicians. They told me you have to play piano till you're 18. That wasn't non-negotiable. At 11 or 12, we tried to rebel. They said, okay, you could play second instrument. So I took up drums, and I play in a band here and have a lifelong love for it.
It is always interesting to see diverse interests that shape influential educators like yourself. Speaking of shaping, let's delve into your professional journey. What inspired you to start Transform Educational Consulting? And looking back, what do you consider the most fulfilling achievement so far?
Well, I wanted to sleep in. I want to have control over my own schedule and say whatever I wanted. No, just kidding. That actually did not come to fruition, right? I find myself spending as much time as I did as an educator. No, but really, I was doing a lot of work. I was at the International School of Beijing at the time, starting a program. It was called Futures Academy. It was a wall-to-wall, learner-centered program in which students were able to take on their own projects, tackle issues and problems that directly relate to the community. Some were around water quality, some was around authoring their own books, building businesses to raise funds for local nonprofits. And we're merging all the curriculum through this. And, we had visitors who had come to see this program and they'd want to do something similar. And I'd done some workshops here and there. And there's just a point where I determined there's just too much of a need, and it's too hard for me to be able to fulfill that need and also be working full-time here. So I left my full-time position coordinating this program and kind of ventured into that world. And really my core ethos, my core mission, I think, has always been to help educators in the most simple ways to just start making these shifts to more student-centered environments. The only last thing I would add is that it always helps me to remember when I first started as an educator and I was 2 years through and I was trying to make this shift into a student-centered environment. When I went to High Tech High, which some of your listeners might be familiar with, that was world-renowned school for these kind of experiences. And I just felt like my head was, underwater trying to do this because it's not something teacher training school really prepares us for, to really give full ownership over to our kids. And someone handed me a piece of paper. It was a founder of the school, and it had shifts going from one side of the paper to the other. He says, this is what we want to kind of see in your classroom. That paper has made all the difference. And now it's kind of my ethos to support others in making those shifts as well.
It's quite clear that your passion for making a difference has actually driven your work. And building on that, you have been a very strong advocate for creating learner centered environments, like you just mentioned. Could you share an impactful example from your work wherein this approach significantly influenced a school or a group of students?
Yeah, sure. And I like you said school and group of students, because I truly feel when you engage in this work of student-centered environments, it's not just impactful for the students. I think it's impactful for the classroom, the educators, and the school at large. I think the overwhelming challenge to face is how do you build this kind of momentum, especially when we have these mandated curriculums. We've got testing structures and exams. And I know the first obstacle that teachers usually think of, with good reason, is, hey, this is overwhelming to try to do. And so I want to start with that and share, an impactful example of where it could work. One is when you maybe don't have that much control over your curriculum and the units you're teaching, but maybe you do over the pathway. And one where you maybe have a little bit more control and freedom. So the first one was a secondary school I was working with in San Diego. It was an inner city school in a very, very disadvantaged part of the city. I'm sure probably in India and other places you have these areas where the school, is surrounded by poverty. And, these particular students were busy in their English class studying The Great Gatsby and learning about the American dream. And, The Great Gatsby is all about this privileged background of people who live. And these kids just didn't connect at all, with it. And the language teacher had done everything that she could. And, she tried every way to make engaging. She allowed them to write their own kind of book reports, allow them maybe form little groups and talk about the book, but they just weren't that engaged in it. And so when we worked together, it was looking at how do we make this more student-centered? Let's look at one of the shifts in terms of what we can do to do that. And it was looking at the shift and making just more real. How do you take things that we have in our curriculum, and the shift is taking it from a teacher-centered to a kind of a co-designed experience. And so she shifted it. They still talked about the American dream, but they talked about it from a different perspective. They talked about the perspective of the person down the street who started their own small business, who had migrated over from Mexico. They talked about it in terms of the person who had started their own youth community center in that area. And these were community stories. And all she had to do is make one shift in the way she kind of looked at things. And students produced this brilliant podcast of stories from the community. That's what they wanted to do. She allowed them to choose, how they shared these stories. And she used still the text as kind of a basis to look at, hey, let's compare and contrast what's happening in the book between the lives that you see of these characters and, the lives that you see of people around you. So that's one example. Do you want me to give you the other example as
Yes,
well?
please.
Okay, sure. So that's one where you might have limited control over what you can do. If you have a little bit more, which a lot of elementary schools do, because they see the same kids all day. She saw these kids for an hour or two a day and then go off to their other subject classrooms. In this elementary school had more freedom in terms of what they could actually produce. So one of the shifts that they were looking at is making things, a lot more active, right? Going from this passive to these more active learners and having a real community audience for their work. And so looking at those shifts, everybody in the elementary school had to look at one of those shifts and designing an experience around it. One teacher looked at the green spaces at the school and had her students go through this whole investigation for how to create more of those. So they took a space in the school and they made it much more green. They had community gardens. They had little play areas as well. And the students were the ones who pretty much designed what was going to go in there. And these students were 6 years old. So that was pretty amazing. And the 9-year-olds in a class next door, literally, were engaging in this whole chocolate shop where they were developing their own little chocolate shops. They had their own pitches and market and everything. They filmed videos in the green screen room, the theater at school, and put it together and sold out of their chocolate within the first, I think, 5-10 minutes. They had all the other classes come in. But they're learning how to be miniature entrepreneurs. And so this one lasted for 4 or 5 weeks, and it would be half the day that they'd have on the afternoon sessions where they'd run this. So I thought those were pretty impactful.
That is insanely good. I mean, when you think of 6 years old and 9 years old and the San Diego school that you talked about, that's bigger than just a classroom. It's a community that are going to be global citizens of tomorrow.
Yeah, and that is, I think, you hit it. It's when you're in that, when you pick something kind of small just to focus on in a couple of shifts to empower learners, you're going
Yeah.
to see that the results, as you mentioned, it's going to impact more than just the classroom. It's going to create a culture and mindset, around agency, I think.
Oh, 100%. Based on your extensive global experience, like we were just talking about, how do you view the role of networking in education in achieving all of this?
Yeah,
Actually
so I mean,
empowering these people.
yeah, I think it's monumental, right? Because we can feel quite isolated, I guess. It's an isolating profession. You kind of close your door and do your own thing. And for us to really make these big shifts in education, we can't view it as this isolated thing. So whether it's going to conferences and learning, new kind of techniques or connecting with other educators, whether it's networking online and being part of different groups, LinkedIn during COVID was incredible
Yeah.
connection, I think, for a lot of educators that were looking for ways to connect their kids because, their kids were at home. There was a youth change maker program that was designed to connect kids all the way from Europe through Asia, and they did. And they had these challenges that they would run, and the students would take the challenge. So one of them was Sustainable Development Goal 4, like how do we improve education? Because, of course, during COVID, like
Yeah.
we didn't know what education was going to look like. And these teams of students would work on their ideas, their proposals. Some kids came up with how to develop these learning apps that would get to these lower income regions. Some were more kind
Mm.
of activity based, but the students were the ones thinking of these things that happen. So that network of educators was so important to come together to understand like who's doing this kind of work, where are their opportunities, what might I be able to do in my own classroom. And these connections we can form now are global, and
Yeah.
they're not just to the classroom next door.
Yeah. And the global perspective is crucial. Like you said, the Europe kids were getting connected to all over Asia. And especially as we prepare the students for the future in terms of preparation, upskilling of educator is also becoming increasingly important. From your viewpoint, why is this continuous learning vital, and how does it support 21st century teaching?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack in that, and there's some language, right? We say upskill in 21st century teaching. Um, First of all, I mean, I guess we're far into the 21st century now, right? We're
Yeah.
24
Yeah.
years in, right? And we use that at the turn of the century. And then the
Closer to
second part is,
22.
yeah, I know I could say 22nd century skills, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, who we're always kind of shifting that and changing, kind of what exactly that looks like. But the term upskilling, I kind of like this term more of like up learning, or and I've kind of coined this now recently, just looking at your questions, like unlearning to uplearn. And what I mean by that is, we're always going to be behind when it comes to
Mm.
skills, right? I mean, things are moving at just way too
Very
fast of a
fast.
rate. And teachers have enough just to keep up with, right? With just being comfortable with their own curriculum. An example of this, I had a student when I was teaching Greece, and he knew way more about Greek mythology. Now, when I first started, I was like, oh God, I got to upskill myself, know everything I can about Greek mythology because I got to keep up with this kid. And I suppose it was more important to I guess, unlearn these patterns of like constantly being in the know and knowing all these things and
Yeah.
saying, what do my learners, in my classroom know? What can I kind of unlearn? And then how do I kind of uplearn and develop this kind of mindset? So I say three buckets, the reason why it's so important to do. One is so that we can connect better to kids and kind of the way in which they process information. I think especially technology.
Very true.
Yeah, like we can't keep up, right? There's just no way. And I'd rather take the learner mindset and say, okay, as we're doing, whatever this program is, maybe we're making stop motion films. I don't know anything about stop motion,
Yeah.
but I know 5 of my kids know about that. So I guess it's less of upskilling and more of kind of just developing this, this learner and modeling this learner mindset. And I think that's going to help us become more comfortable in the classroom. I think what we can do in terms of upskill is more kind of like the approaches to teaching and learning, I think are more important than all the skills, because if we can learn the approaches, for example, to have a student-centered classroom, like the approaches of how do we have stations and station-based learning? How do we foster inquiry? And what are some ways in which we can promote more inquiry and develop our inquirers in the classroom? How do we kind of organize these experiences? How do we turn over our classrooms to our students and kind of co-create together? These are kind of the more, to me, what I believe is a skills we need to upskill ourselves on.
That's very beautifully explained, actually. It's unlearning and working with the kids rather than for the kids. I think that is a giveaway from all of this. As we talk about preparing the future, mental health emerges as a key area within the education. What strategies would you suggest for schools to better integrate mental wellness into their curriculum, ensuring both educators and students thrive, not just the students?
Yeah, and that's a tough one, because I think especially, I mean, during COVID, it seemed to be such a strong point, mental health, social, emotional health. And I don't know how it is there. It seems like, I don't know that we've backslided necessarily, but it seems like now that everyone's back in school, that, the mental health, social, emotional health, like that kind of topic hasn't been as much in the forefront. And I think it definitely necessarily does. And I think before we look at integrating into our curriculum, because our curriculum's packed already, right? And we already have so many things. I wonder if it's more of kind of the culture we create at the school. How do we take care of our educators and their mental wellness? I've seen schools have these wellness days. I've seen them have wellness lunches, and have the opportunity, for educators and for students to have some of this meditative time. I've seen them introduce this in the mornings as part of these advisories before they even go off to their classes, where they'll have a 45-minute period, and it's just really focused on, that wellness and checking in. I think a lot of it has to do with just how we build our relationships. I think also wellness has to do with being well known and being connected. And, I wonder how these very large schools can accomplish that. I think, having these smaller communities as much as possible in these large schools, like I mentioned with his advisory homeroom for check-in, is really crucial to help, with the mental health. And I would say finally in the curriculum is not just to have it as another bolt-on to the curriculum and say, okay, we have all our buckets, our subjects. Now we have our wellness bucket, because again, I think it's kind of already a packed curriculum.
Yes.
I think it's more about making it just meaningful, and scheduling, I think, time in for it is more important than anything else. Because if you pack in a curriculum and still within a 45-minute class period, and now you say, now we have to address wellness as well, that's not conducive for wellness. I'll just give you a short anecdote. A school during COVID had the wellness curriculum given to them because they knew how important it was. And this teacher was teaching the approaches of how important it is to be connected and giving, and how that helps for your own mental wellness. Right. And the kids were bored to tears. I mean, they were literally, it was probably causing more mental health damage to them by having to sit through this curriculum, right? And so the teacher worked with someone else on campus who believed more in kind of active learning, and said, look, let's still focus on the core tenets of giving and gratitude and how important that is and how that makes you feel. But let's have them involved in an active experience. So they spent time going through this whole design thinking process and actually creating a room for the lower elementary school that was kind of a checkout room, a play room, and developing all these play kind of therapy toys and stuff for their younger peers. And then addressing, of course, what the curriculum is addressing in terms of wellness. So again, that's, this is only one example, but I wonder, rather than making a bolt on the curriculum, how we can make it just more a meaningful part of the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. I think making it, like you said, just having a wellness day or a wellness hour might not, like kids were getting bored and everything, like you've mentioned. I think practicality, talking to the kids, arranging some kind of activities that will keep their, mind occupied in a healthy manner. I mean, I think all of that could be foundational when it comes to mental health wellness.
Yeah, and can I also add something else that I forgot,
Yes,
if that's
please.
okay? I think we just need to start taking things off of the plate of kids and educators, right? I mean, we might be able to talk about mental wellness, but I think let's look seriously at what's causing the mental health issues that we see in
Yeah.
schools, exams, and the pressure of these kids to. I know here the pressure is so high that the kids end school at 2 p.m., 3 p.m., and then they go off to after school tutoring for 3-4 hours. Then they do their homework that was assigned. And some of these kids are 10, 11 years old, and it's 10 p.m. and
Yeah.
they're working on homework till 11. So I think, we've got to take a serious look at what are we taking off the plates of our
Yeah.
educators? What are we taking off the plates of our students? What can we give up? Because I don't think we can still have all these things in place and
Yeah.
then start talking about mental health.
I think exams and pressure is a global issue of children developing mental health issues. And it's like you
Mm.
said, after school tutoring, then there's homework. Then by the time they're done, it's 11, their day is done, they're tired, they want to go and just sleep and not have actually do anything about that. And same with educators. I think they also have a very
Hmm.
such a pressure to complete the curriculum, complete the courses, manage whatever is coming from the management, and the whole thing, it doesn't fit. So I think releasing the pressure maybe and taking some things off their plates would actually help. But only how
Yeah.
much can be done. Your insights have been incredibly inspiring, actually. In enriching, of course, but inspiring to the way you look at the world and your perspective. To wrap up, for those who are inspired by your journey and looking to make their mark in the education consulting, what piece of advice would you offer based on your wealth of experience?
It's hard to say advice because, advice usually comes from my perspective, and it's very kind of a limited viewpoint. But I will say this, to say yes to those early opportunities. If you are getting an education consulting, you might have a viewpoint of what you think schools want,
Hmm.
what you think educators want. I thought I did, and it turned out to be partially true, but radically more true. And I just said, look, how can I best support you? What are your needs? How can I align my skill set? So be clear for sure about where you can best support schools or where you can best support learning. But then also, say yes to opportunities that come about, because you never know if doing a podcast, doing a workshop, doing a conference, doing that thing where you flew over and all you did is spend a half day at a school just trying
Yeah,
to fire some people up. You never know how that might support them and where it might lead you. So
yeah.
that's my piece of
That's
advice.
that's actually very, very, very good advice because we
Mhm.
are very scared at this day and age. Everybody is very scared to take two chances. But I think doing that opens a lot of other things in life, and you never know what hits.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. You never know, right? I always say we base our decisions off of our very limited, narrow vision of what could be, right? But
true.
there's so much more possibility. And I think it's just about saying yes to those opportunities and getting yourself out there. What do you want to say? I think every educator wants to say something. And I sit down with educators at conferences when they can give a workshop for their peers around something they're doing in their classroom. I see their eyes light up. Everybody's eyes light up because it's their chance to share what they're doing. So,
Yeah,
don't be afraid if you're listening to this to share whatever that is, because people want to hear it, and you're going to have a voice in your head that says people don't want to hear it, and actually what I have to say is not valuable. And then you just silence that voice and say, yes,
So
they do. They
true.
need it.
So true. I think that voice is our biggest enemy for
Yeah.
everybody. Thank you so much for your time and this amazing, amazing podcast. It has been lovely, and I love the kind of perspective that you have about everything that you've been doing. And I wish you all the very, very best for your book.
Thank you, Shruti, for the questions and being so engaging as an interview host.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Kyle, it has been a blast having you light up our podcast today. Your stories and strategies are like a masterclass in shaking up the education for better. Thanks for diving into the deep end with us and sharing your playbook for innovation and connection in the classroom. To all our awesome listeners, we hope Kyle's journey and insights have sparked some kind of genius ideas of your own. Keep chasing those educational game changers. Let's all keep learning, laughing, and leading the way to brighter future. A huge thanks to Kyle Wagner for joining the fun here at SELINTalks. Catch you all for the next episode for more enlightening chats. Keep rocking the world of education, everyone. Thank you.